Good evening and welcome. I'm Susie Jaffe, a member of the AJC National Board of Governors and past president of AJC's New York region. I am truly delighted that so many of you have come to AJC headquarters this evening to help celebrate the launch of Exit Berlin, How One Woman Saved Her Family from Nazi Germany, and to hear directly from Charlotte Bonelli, the book's author and director of AJC Archives. I read the book cover to cover in one sitting, and I can promise you that you're in for a real treat. Exit Berlin is based on more than 300 letters Luzie Hatch wrote to her parents and other relatives left behind in Germany after she came by herself to New York in 1938, about a week after Kristallnacht. And also letters she wrote to her American cousin Arnold in Albany, who assisted in so many ways in the rescue. The letters offer unique insights into Nazi Germany and the Holocaust from the perspective of one young German Jewish woman, and also how an average American Jewish family responded to the Holocaust to assist relatives whom they may or may not have known trapped in Europe. Charlotte will provide her presentation more details about the letters and the impact of the letters. I do want to remind us that in an age of smartphones, Twitter, and other rapid communication technologies, that back in the 1930s, when Luzie set out to save her family, detailed correspondence was the main communication tool. Now I would like to welcome a couple of guests in the audience, Stephen Solomon and Roger Blaine of the law firm Hutton and Solomon, who represented Luzie for many years. It was Roger who found the letters in Luzie's Forest Hills apartment, where she had lived alone for 61 years. And it was Roger who called Charlotte, our author, to tell her about the letters. You see, there was a direct AJC connection. Luzie, for most of her life in New York, worked at AJC in this very building, Jean tells me on the second floor, right below we were now sitting. By chance, she landed a job here only 4 months after her arrival from Germany and continued to work at AJC for the next 38 years until 1977. A few AJC staff, including Executive Director David Harris, remember Luzie well. David will say a few words and then we will move to the main part of our program, hearing directly from Charlotte. There will be questions and answers after Charlotte speaks. Lastly, I want to point out that C-SPAN is here to film this Exit Berlin event for its popular book TV program. We will let you know when it is scheduled to air in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Susie, for introducing the program. I'm a lucky person. I had the privilege to know Luzie, as Susie mentioned. I joined AJC staff in 1979, which was 2 years after Luzie retired, but then she never really retired. She kept coming back to the building on a regular basis. This was really her family in many ways. And so I met her when I was a young staff member and got to know her very well over the years. Of course, what I didn't know, what I think none of us knew, and I'm looking at those who were there at the same time, people like Jean Dubow, was this treasure trove of letters and the story that it held, and that has now been revealed by my colleague, Charlotte Bonelli, who's done this extraordinary work, and the result is the book that brings us all together today. So for me, Luzie's story is really a story of several things. It's a story, first of all, of what each of us can do, if only we choose to do it. You know, if one wants to think about heroes and heroines and wants to set out to imagine what they're like, our popular world suggests that they have to be of a certain type. Daring and big and strong and brave and who knows what. Luzie, had she been in this room, would not have filled much physical space. Not at all. So at first glance, she might not have been the image of the hero or the heroine. So in a sense, Luzie's experience is not just something for us to read and absorb and cry over. and occasionally smile over. It's also a challenge. I believe it's a challenge to each and every one of us to ask ourselves, are we capable of such action? Quiet, unheralded, unsung, under very difficult circumstances, Suzie, as you said a while back, when people depended on mail, and it was not always the most reliable thing in wartime, mail across oceans and continents. So the second thing for me about Luzie is that when I got to know her, she was very deeply involved in our pioneering German programming. Now that may at first glance not have been the likeliest place for Luzie to spend her life. After all, just a few years before, she had fled Germany. She had spent years trying to get her family out of the clutches of the Third Reich. And yet here she was a couple of decades later, in the forefront, devoting a great deal of her life to trying to build new bridges of understanding and cooperation between Germany, the Jewish people, through the vehicle of AJC. And that to me as well is a very powerful story. A powerful story that suggests that, as has been said by a famous philosopher, it is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And I believe that that was indeed her outlook. And finally, for me, the Luzie story is personal, not just because I knew and cared about her, and not just because I know and care about you, Charlotte Bonelli, and this remarkable effort you've made, but also because, on a very personal level, I identify with the story. Had it not been for a man named Morris Ruby and his wife Ida, who lived in Mahoney City, Pennsylvania, an improbable destination for a family that began their life in Russia, 14 members of my family would never have made it to the United States. And since those 14 people include my mother, I dare say I would not be standing here but for another Luzie Hatch. I cherish her memory, I honor her memory, and I ask all of us to be inspired to our own actions in response to the actions that she took on behalf of her family. So thank you for being here, and Charlotte, a special thanks to you for bringing this story to life.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes? Just a few quick thank yous here. I'd like to thank Suzie Jaffe for chairing this event tonight. And I also want to say one other thing here. Before there was Exit Berlin, there was just a dusty pile of letters. And when I said, you know, there's a book here. This is something special. We have a book here. Some people were not quite so believing, but not David Harris. From the very beginning, he was enthusiastic about this project, and I really appreciated it. I would also like to thank our very able and spirited translator, Natasha Bodeman, who is here. Lyra Broche, a friend of mine, an outstanding English professor, who told me these letters could be framed in a narrative. I was not initially so convinced, but she persisted. Bonnie Fetterman, a constant source of wise advice on the publishing industry. And the very talented literary agent who handled this, and that would be Carol Mann. And I would be remiss if I did not thank Ken Bandler for all of his very hard work in bringing Exit Berlin to the attention of the public. And so we come to Exit Berlin. Exit Berlin began with a phone call I received one day from a very excited attorney. He had a donation for the AJC archives, a collection of World War II-era letters he had stumbled upon in the apartment of the late Luzie Hatch, a Jewish refugee from Berlin. I have to admit, I was not very interested. In the past, people had come forth with donations, and they had never proved suitable. But this attorney was so excited about his discovery, and it was clear to me that he was not about to give in so easily. And there was another factor. Although I had never known Luzie, I knew she had spent a lifetime at AJC. And I said to myself, how can you not even look at the letters? And so out of respect for her memory, on a brutal summer day, I